Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to this week's Customer Service Revolution podcast, where John DiJulius interviews the legendary Seth Godin. A well-deserved inductee into the Marketing Hall of Fame, Seth is the author of 19 best-selling books, which have been translated into more than 35 languages. His manifesto, The Purple Cow, was the first marketing book I devoured almost 20 years ago, and it's still relevant today. His latest book, This is Marketing, became an instant worldwide bestseller. And in today's podcast, you'll hear about his newest book, which will be launching in November of 2020, The Practice, Shipping Creative Work. Seth is the founder of the altMBA and the Akimbo Workshops, online seminars that have transformed the work of thousands of people. Akimbo, by the way, is also the name of Seth's incredibly popular podcast. In addition to his writing and speaking, Seth has founded several companies, including Yoyodyne and Squidoo. His blog, which you can find by typing Seth into Google, is one of the top blogs in the world. In today's podcast, you'll find out how this brilliant author got started in his career, what some of his successes and failures were along the way, too. I think you'll really enjoy hearing Seth talk about how skill and talent are not the same, how passion is a choice, and that, yes, you can be a leader without having anyone underneath you. John gets him to share what he wants his legacy to be and gets his input on how to deal with the pandemic. Plus, we find out what Seth will be presenting on at the 2020 Customer Service Revolution Virtual Conference in October, an event you don't want to miss. If you haven't already, you can grab your tickets now at customerservicerevolution.com. Now here's your host, the customer experience expert helping companies become the brand their customers can't live without, John DiJulius.
Hello, revolutionaries. This is John DiJulius with another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. And today, we all have the good fortune of talking with the legendary Seth Godin. Seth has an amazing history as an entrepreneur, best-selling author of 18 books. I don't know if his new one is number 18 or number 19, but he'll tell us. Graduated from Stanford. Has been a super successful entrepreneur, author, VP of Yahoo and in the corporate world. And we're just really excited to have you. Thank you, Seth.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to connect, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Seth, tell us, I know you don't love talking about yourself, but you've had this amazing journey straight out of Stanford. Tell us at a high level what that's looked like. And let me just ask something more specific. And I don't know if this is a good way to phrase you, but I have one word that I think encapsulates Seth better than anyone, and it's contrarian. And I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I just do. I mean, you look at things, everything so different and insightful, and it makes, I think your readers and your followers re-examine what we thought we were looking at. Is that a word that you had?
I'll settle for re-examine. So the short version is the two key elements of the arc of my career have been failure, repeated failure that is non-fatal, as well as some extraordinary good, lucky, privileged bounces, some of which had to do with customer service. And the part that I'll share with you is I showed up at Stanford. I was second youngest person in the business school, and they did not make me feel welcome. That summer, I got a job in Boston working as a brand manager at a fast-growing software company. And all the other brand managers were 7 to 10 years older than me. And I had no clue what I was doing. And I was flailing around trying to see what would work and what didn't. And I was fortunate that my boss's boss supported that. But I ended up...
Were you still in school at this time?
Yeah, that was a summer job. But
okay.
Then I didn't go back to school. I got Stanford to give me a degree anyway and stayed in Boston my second year of business school. And I would fly back to Stanford once every few weeks on the red eye. But Christmas rolls around and I had nothing else to do. So I went into work on Christmas Day and answered the phones for 8.5 hours. So for 8.5 hours at this company that sold computer software to kids for the Commodore 64 in 1983, I'm like, we were the only company in America that was answering the phone on Christmas Day for toys. And I was talking people through how to make the software work. And
so you were support, you're acting as support?
Yeah, I was the only person. I just answered the phones all day. And the miracle of that was I learned two things. First of all, there are very few organizations that will mind if you show up. And I just showed up. And secondly, for the next 9 months at any meeting I went to, if I said something like, well, talking to our customers, and then said anything, everyone said, yeah, that must be true, because I was the only person who had ever talked to our customers. And that was a huge leap for me. And since then, it's been 40 years of projects. And I view most of my projects as useful efforts that didn't necessarily have a home run as an outcome. They let me play again. They let me do another one. And with each project, whether it worked or didn't work, I spent time with my customers. And I figured out how to use my interactions with customers as an asset and a lever, not as a chore. And I think that is at the essence of the revolution you're talking about. But I know that it has paid off big for me.
So is it safe to say your advice to senior leaders is get out there and talk to your customer?
Yeah, one of the things I've been saying to people for years is people like to raise their hand and say, you're talking about this and this and this, but my boss won't let me. And I'm like, well, of course your boss won't let you, because if they say yes to your crazy ideas, they're on the hook. And why would they? You should figure out how to do things without your boss's permission. And if they work, give your boss credit. And if they don't work, take the blame. And the second half of that is take your iPhone and go videotape a bunch of your customers talking about your wins and your losses. Edit it into a 2-minute video and start showing that video to your bosses and your bosses' bosses. Because I got to tell you, if you show 2 minutes of edited footage of one customer after another talking about how much they hate your company, things are going to change. They're going to change because you can bring that voice into the organization in a way that was impossible in the old days.
So let me backtrack. You said part of your career journey was failures. What is one that, you could share that you learned from? And
I have more than anyone, which I'm super proud of. So for example, I designed packaging that was a 4-fold gatefold of this beautiful software for Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury. We had the greatest science fiction authors. I was in my element. And I don't know if you remember Handelman. I think they're in Cleveland. They were the big jobber that put records and software in Kmart and Target. And so you had to make Handelman happy. And these things were big and floppy. So we had to seal them, but I didn't want to shrink wrap them, because if I shrink wrapped them, people wouldn't be able to see what was inside. So I ordered 10,000 little tiny Velcro dots, both sides, so that it would stay shut or open. Well, I forgot to test the little tiny Velcro dots on the packaging. And so on the assembly line, we were putting on all the little tiny Velcro dots and they just fell off. 10,000 of them fell off. And the lesson I was supposed to learn from this is leave things like packaging to professionals. That's not the lesson I learned. The lesson I learned is 10,000 Velcro dots aren't that expensive. And it cost me less to try Velcro dots than just going straight, having a study done, whatever. I came up with books my first year as a book packager, How to Hypnotize Your Friends and Get Them to Act Like Chickens. That was a failure. I did a book in 1988 called The Best of the Net. And 92, The Best of the Net. And The Best of the Net was a directory of all the cool things you could do on the internet. What I should have done, instead of making $6,000 from that project, is started Yahoo, because they started the same year I was writing a book about what they were making a software about. And their company at one point was worth $80 billion. So my half would have been worth 40, and all I got was a book. It wasn't a good trade. And, I've launched things that didn't get customers. I've put things into the world where I thought people would react one way, but they reacted the other way. The book I spent most of my career writing compared to any other is called Survival is Not Enough. Charles Darwin wrote the foreword. It was my least selling book ever. I only sold 14,000 copies or 20,000 copies. So you don't know. You just don't know. But you got to play.
So the takeaway is you just got to do it. And you can't, there's no, recipe other than doing it.
Yeah. That's my take.
Practice. You got to practice. All right. So back to let me try to be the therapist here or whatever, but why, your blogs, your daily blogs, your Purple Cow, Linchpin, permission marketing, all that. It is contrarian. It is really unique. I love, and they're short, they're concise, but it's an aha that such a simple way. Where did that come from? Was that something that come from your environment as a kid? Like, what made you look at things and not accept them for the way 99.9% of us do?
Well, here's what I think. I think having spent an enormous amount of time with 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds is that most kids are like that. Most kids see something in the world and try to figure out how it works. They see something in the world and they're curious. And then we boil it out of them and we burn it out of them. And I had amazing parents growing up in Buffalo, New York, and they did not burn it out of me. But where it really mattered, I think, is at my very first job, the software company, on the very first day, I walked in and they had one of those plastic round carousels for the while you were out messages. And it had 30 slots all in a circle. And on each slot was a name tag. And the name tags weren't in alphabetical order because people did not join the company in alphabetical order. They were in the order you joined. And I was the 30th employee, so I got the last slot. And I walk in there the first day and I see this thing. And I'm like, every day, I'm going to have to come up to this thing and spin it and spin it and spin it until I find my name. And I reached over to the receptionist thing and she had a container of paper clips. And I put a paper clip next to my name. So then all I would have to do is spin and find the paper clip. And within 4 hours, the entire thing was festooned with flags, with colored things. It worked. Like, it changed everything for everyone. It wasn't selfish. It was generous. And I was like, that's me. That's what I'm from now on. I'm the one who's going to show up with paper clips. 'Cause I will not be able to do spreadsheets better than anyone. I will not be able to have difficult conversations than anyone. I will not be able to do negotiations better than anyone. But you need a paper clip in a place where no one expected a paper clip, you can call me. That's my shtick.
I love it. I love it. All right. So is this book 18 or 19?
The Practice is book number 20. I don't know where your bio
20.
came from, but it's woefully out of date.
Oh, my gosh. Hey, I'm right behind you. If I write one book a year for the next 15 years, I will catch you.
You can do it. We're rooting
now.
for you.
If you stop now, I have a feeling you're not going to stop. So The Practice, thank you for sending me an advanced copy. It's coming out in November. I actually did read most of it, and I'm excited about this. And it's, again, your quintessential Seth with just short, insightful chunks to digest. And it's one of those books that you can digest in different periods. You don't have to, swallow it. It probably isn't good to swallow it all in 1 week or one reading. And that's what I really like about it. Here's something that's a little embarrassing to me. The first couple pages reading it, I got this epiphany. And I don't know, it feels like a silly epiphany because I don't know why it's never dawned on me. And I don't know if you meant for this, but if you would have asked me before I read the book, what a leader is, I would have stated a leader is of many people, coaches and generals and CEOs and whatever that may look like, right?
Yeah.
And I never, and something you said in different ways, never would have thought as an artist who leads no one, as a leader, as a author, as musician who technically doesn't have direct reports, as someone who leads. But then something that jumped out at me in the book was anyone that's creating and innovating is a leader. Is that something like, is that a duh moment?
I don't think it's a duh moment at all. And I think the words are really important. I'm going to go in the other order. So here we go. Managers are essential. Managers permit industrial entities to work and armies too. Managers have authority. And people who care about customer service are either managers or work for managers. There are managers all around. But managers are not leaders because leading is voluntary. It is voluntary to lead. It is voluntary to be led. That's why we have different words for leading and managing. That the leader may also be a CEO, but most CEOs are not leaders. Most CEOs are just trying to give the shareholders what they want. Leading says, I'm not sure how this is going to work. I'm not sure exactly how to get there, but we're going over there. Who wants to come? And so, if you think about 10 years of Dunkin' Donuts versus 10 years of Starbucks, for 10 years when Howard Schultz was at his peak, he was leading. They were exploring new things. They were discovering. They were taking things that looked like risks. Whereas Dunkin', if you were in Boston, you needed a cup of coffee, Dunkin' was going to give you what they gave you yesterday. One is a management thing. One is a leadership thing. And so then I say, if you are a leader, by my definition, you're an artist, because art has nothing to do with painting or prettiness or design. Art is what I call it when a human does something original that might not work. And later in the book, I talk about imposter syndrome, which is that feeling people get of like, who am I to speak up and lead? Who am I to say I know what's next? And people say to me, how do I get rid of imposter syndrome? And
Isn't part of imposter syndrome if I think I'm fooling people? Like, I've had some success, but one of these days, people are going to realize who I really am.
They're going to figure out I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
And so how do I get rid of that feeling? And my answer is, you should have that feeling because you are a fraud. Anyone who's leading is a fraud because you don't know if it's going to work. Because if it was going to work, you'd just be a manager. That what it means to be a leader, what it means to be an artist is to act as if, to describe the future before it gets here, to say, based on who I am and what I know and what I see, over there is a good place. But I can't guarantee it because how could I? That's the future. So feeling like an imposter is actually a good thing because it means you're onto something. It means that you're leaning out of the boat and creating value, doing something that most people aren't willing to do, which is living in the future.
Yeah, I actually think that the imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, is a way of keeping us in check because I know anytime I've ever failed, it's come right after where I think I've made it, right? When you get one too many standing ovations and, I've arrived versus when I'm the underdog, I do a lot better. But when I think I'm no longer the underdog and I'm entitled, the hurricane comes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, in Icarus Deception, I talk about hubris and how we were brainwashed into not flying too high. And at some level, it's a really useful lesson to keep in a place where you feel like you can contribute without being arrogant. But on the other hand, it's really dangerous because it's used to keep us in check. It's used against people who aren't given privilege. It's used against people who might not look or act like the people in charge. All of those things are not helpful because our culture is the sum total of everyone's contribution. And so creating an environment where people can show up and notice and talk and lead, that's critical if you want your organization to get better.
And so by this definition, was Beethoven a leader?
Well, I think it's pretty clear if you look at the arc of music that he bent it. He bent it a lot. That music is different because with no authority, Beethoven changed it. Well, that's leading. Lewis and Clark didn't have anyone who they paid to follow them, but they drew maps and the maps changed things.
Right. And that's what was my epiphany because before that I was like, oh no, he was a wonderful musician, but he wasn't a leader. But you made me think of it differently. It doesn't have to be about direct reports to be a leader if you're changing. So, I put the cart before the horse. Tell us about the practice, in your words, what is the practice?
The subtitle is the key to the whole thing. It's called shipping creative work. So if you have a job where we are writing down everything you're supposed to do every day, then we're going to find a computer to take your place really soon. Years ago, when I was staying in hotels, as I often do, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I call the front desk and I say to the front desk, what time does the gym open? Because the gym should always be open, but I have to ask, what time is the gym open? And the person who answers says, what hotel are you in? And no one had ever said that to me before. And I realized that what they had done was moved all the operators to one building, right? Well, after that, I repeated my question and this person hit a button and it read to me out loud a recording answering my question. So now this operator probably isn't obsessed with job security, but they don't have any because they're only one click away from adding a Google Assistant to have heard what I said,
right.
Play me the recording, they're gone. So I'm going to argue that anyone who's listening to this podcast doesn't have a job like that. You have a job where you have the freedom to listen to a podcast. You have the job where someone is counting on you to make a change happen. That's creative work. And so if you are holding back and not shipping creative work, waiting for your competitors to go first so you can copy them, you might need this book. Because what I'm arguing in this book is you don't need to be gifted. You don't need to be touched by the muse. You simply need to do the work. That creative work is a practice. It is not a gift. And that practice is available to everybody.
And you repeatedly say, if it doesn't ship, it doesn't count.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, I don't know about you, but I regularly run into people who say, I invented this, or I invented that, or I have a great idea for this, or great. And I'm like, well, yeah, but what did you do with it? Well, doesn't count. Doesn't count. All your noodling at home, not interested. Because this is about generosity. Leadership and generosity go next to each other. So if you're not shipping it, doesn't count. It's not art if it's only in your house.
So I have a great idea for a book. I have a great idea. I'm not shipping it, right? And
doesn't
so
count.
I'm cheating the world of that great idea potentially.
Correct. Absolutely
Good.
correct.
Good. It's about finding your voice.
Right. So now we get to the word your, which is so fascinating. The original title for the book was Trust Yourself. So if someone says, I was talking to myself, here's my question. Who's I and who's myself? It sounds like there's two voices in your head, doesn't there? The one who's talking and the one who's listening. And in fact, everyone has two of those voices in their head. There's one which you're hoping will show up with creativity. And there's the other one that's always telling you you're wrong, you're stupid, you should be quiet, you should sit down. And those two voices argue, and the naysayer usually wins. But if we could trust the other one, trust that voice enough to be generous, we will learn a lot by letting it out. And that's why I blog every day. I'm not going to have a blog tomorrow because it's perfect. I'm going to have a blog tomorrow because it's tomorrow. And I do that every day. And that teaches me that shipping creative work is my job.
Love it. And for someone that's written 20 books, something that was shocking to me was that I believe you said there's no such thing as writer's block.
Correct.
How can an author of 20 books and tens of thousands of blog articles say that?
Well, have you ever heard of plumber's block?
No.
No plumber gets plumber's block. No plumber shows up at your house and says, I can't fix the leaky faucet because I have plumber's block. Do you have some whiskey? No. And in fact, there's no surgeon's block. There's no juggler's block. Why do writers get this special thing? Well, actually, what writers mean is, I'm not sure the next thing I'm going to write is going to be perfect. So nobody gets bad writing block. Everyone could do bad writing. And so my argument is, show me all your bad writing. And if you do enough bad writing, I guarantee there's going to be some good stuff in there. There's got to be a pony in there somewhere. And so we need to be really clear with our language about what do we mean when we say we're blocked. I think what we mean is we're afraid. We're afraid that someone's going to look at something we wrote and think it's not very good.
So it's like, I heard a great quote hundreds of years ago, 30 years ago, that said, if you wait till it's time to take the training wheels off, you'll never take them off, right? Is it something to the effect of, back to your original thing, it's okay to fail. It's okay to write crap, because then the second, third, and fourth draft will be significantly better than probably the first. Am I getting it?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful about calling anything crap. But if you're a music fan, turns out you can listen to the demos from Crosby, Stills, and Nash and from Billy Joel. And it turns out it's really easy to listen to the early takes on every album, many albums that Bob Dylan did. So if you like any of those artists, go listen, because it sounds horrible. It's wrong. It's out of tune or out of beat. It's just wrong. It's not the regular thing you're waiting to hear. But if they hadn't made those demos, they never would have made Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, right? The demos are the point. That's the practice. We show up and we show up and we show up. And then one day we say, here, I made this. But if you need the first one you do to win a Nobel Prize or be polished, it's never going to happen.
Right. Which takes us, I was surprised, number 86. When I saw the headline, skill is not the same as talent, I was like, what do you mean? But, then I searched, and I think the way you say it is you're probably born with talent, right? You were born with some gifts that come a lot easier. But skill is something that if we, go after and the 10,000 hours or whatever, we can develop that. Is that true?
Right. So it's a choice. And what great news is that, right? Like, you and I are never going to be in the NBA. And you and I are probably never going to be microsurgeons. Those are off limits at the highest level, because you need a little bit of talent to do those things. But for most of the work that most people do, there's no talent involved at all. It is just deciding to earn the skill. And so in the altMBA and the other workshops I've built, we're saying to people, if you want to learn, here's a safe place to practice. We don't say that to adults very often, but that dichotomy between learning and education is super important, because you got done being educated 20, 30, 40 years ago, but I hope you're not done learning. And the question is, where are you going to learn your new skills?
And would you say the cross section of skill and talent is how you get a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James? Is you think that's when you
so at the highest levels, the most successful athlete of all time is a guy named Donald Bradman. Donald Bradman was more than twice as good at cricket than Michael Jordan was at basketball. That's the difference between him and every other cricket player. And you look at Bradman, he didn't look like an extraordinary human, but he was he was like Ted Williams. He could see the ball in a way that other people couldn't see it. So yeah, Ted Williams, Don Bradman, Michael Jordan, these are obvious, easily measured talents. Someone with perfect pitch, turns out that's not quite a talent, because if we look at people who are born and raised in China, they are way more likely to have perfect pitch than people whose parents were born in China who were born and raised in the United States. It's not genetic. It turns out if you grew up speaking Chinese, you're more likely to have perfect pitch, because Chinese is a language that is sung as much as it is spoken. So things we thought were talents aren't talents at all. They're just skills we learned at an early age. And I don't think that Tiger Woods has more talent than any other golfer on the circuit. I think he, from an early age, got hardwired to acquire a skill.
Interesting. Leaders are imposters. What does that mean?
Right. So as we spoke about, artists and leaders are the same. That if you're truly a leader, you're announcing the future before it gets here. How can you know for sure? You're acting as if. And so if you manage a team of 5 people, you could just be a manager and you could just announce to them what the rules are. Or you could decide to be a leader and you could describe the future in advance. And you could say, based on what I know and what I believe, we're going over there. And you might not be right, or you might be right, but either way, you can't be sure. And since you can't be sure at some level, you're an imposter.
All right, I like it. The other one that really kind of piqued my interest and made me question your point of view here is passion is a choice, right? So I read it, and passion is a choice. So my first career when I got out of college is, I loaded trucks at UPS in the middle of the night, and I went driving because it paid me more than double anything I could have gotten with my degree, and that which was marketing, by the way. You should be proud of me. So But every day I drove to work and said in 29 more years, 7 months, and 2 days, I could retire. And I wanted to get old as fast as I could because I knew that's not why I was put on the earth. I was like, what are they going to put in my tombstone? He delivered packages in a timely manner, And so how could I have been passionate about a job I didn't want to do? I did it well, but I wasn't passionate about it.
Okay, so we can take this apart in a bunch of ways. First of all, if either of us had lived 150 years ago, pick any job you want from 150 years ago. By my standards, I couldn't have been passionate about it. Even Prime Minister of England, no matter what, there was no job before electricity where I, by my standards, could have been passionate.
Right.
And yet there were passionate people. So clearly it's situational. It is not built into who our genes. Okay. So my late teacher and friend, Zig Ziglar, told the following story. This guy is out in the hinterlands and he's working his farm and a train comes by and it stops. The guy gets off the train and goes over to the farmer and he says, Bob wants to see you. And he goes into the executive car of the train that had stopped. Turns out Bob is the CEO of the train line right now. And he invites him in for a cup of iced tea. And the two of them are sitting there. Turns out they had both started working for the railroad 30 years prior. 30 years prior, they'd both been digging ditches on the side of the road for the railroad. And finally, the guy, the minimum wage laborer, turns to his old friend Bob and says, Bob, what's going on here? How did you end up as the CEO? And he says, well, if you want me to tell you the truth, it's simple. He says, 30 years ago, you went to work for $2 an hour and I went to work for the railroad. And that decision changed everything because Bob decided that his passion was going to be, given what I got, what do I bring to work to make me glad I was here today? And I know UPS drivers. I spent time with one 2 days ago. I brought her a big glass of ice water because they're hardworking, good people. And there was one guy who delivered to my building for 4 years. I sat with his daughter when she was applying for colleges. He was a great UPS driver. And I guarantee you that he got more satisfaction out of his job than the UPS driver one route over. And they both delivered the same number of packages. So the question is, who comes out ahead, UPS or the driver? And so I'm not arguing that it's okay for UPS to misuse, to mistreat. I'm just saying, okay, that happened. Now that it happened, what are you going to do about it? And what you can do about it is choose to be passionate, because passionate isn't something that's done to us. It's something that we choose.
I love it. No, and UPS was a great job. And I was never in better shape. The old joke is that, someone once said, you'll never see a skinny beer deliver driver and you'll never see a fat UPS driver. That's so true. I love it. I love it. So the practice, how does it apply to our current situation, the craziness of the world? And it's funny, I'm sure you were the same way. A couple months ago, I used to, preface that back when we were doing the podcast, we were in a pandemic, like we were coming out of it next week, and this might be an outdated podcast. I don't think we have to worry, unfortunately, about, dating ourselves right now.
So we're living with a whole bunch of revolutions at once, right? There's this long overdue attention to racial injustice, to the Black Lives Matter movement, to treating people poorly through no fault of their own. There's the health that has been impacted of millions of people around the world. There's the economy that is going to take years to recover, right? No one asked for any of this. Okay, so that happened. Now what? Well, here's what we know. Every single time something like this happens, the world changes. There is no back to normal. There's a new normal. What makes the world change? Every time it's changed because passionate people decide to do something that's not in the playbook. So I was at Yahoo when Google could have been purchased for $2 million. And Google only won because the dot-com bubble wiped out expectations of what the internet was going to be. And if we look back at the Spanish flu of the late 1900s and early 1900s, so World War I, that open the door for a 100-year run of industrialism and increased quality of public health and everything else. It's going to happen again. And there's a lot of side effects and a lot of people are suffering, and I'm not minimizing it. The question is, who's going to make things better? And we cannot wait for other people to make things better. We have to say, I see something I can contribute to. I see at least one other person I can turn a light on for. And if we just did that, people would be healthier, the world would be more just, and we would get through this slog faster. As opposed to saying, how do I get back to the old model? Because that's never going to happen.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I agree. Seth, I'm sure you've been asked this or thought about, but what do you want your legacy to be? I mean, you've built so many incredible things. What do you have a preference or a North Star?
I would like to be measured by what the people who learned from me taught other people, because I'm a teacher. I have no empire. I don't have lots of people. If you read a word, it's because I wrote it. I don't have ghostwriters. And I'd like to teach people to teach other people. And it's that contagiousness that enables our culture to get better or worse. And I'm trying to establish legions of people who might teach others.
Say it one more time, the legacy part. You'd like to be measured by
what the people who learn from me teach other people.
Love it. Awesome. Well, I think you've locked that in already. So, which leads me to something I'm really excited about. I think after maybe a decade of stalking you and bugging you, and
very courteously, I might add.
Thank you. Thank you. And you've been very generous to me. You've written some nice testimonials for my books and stuff. So I really thank you for always being kind and generous with your time to me. But this year's Customer Service Revolution, our virtual revolution, Seth is one of our keynote speakers, which is airing every Thursday afternoon in October. And we are really excited. What is the title of your presentation, and what can our audience look forward to learning from your presentation, Seth?
I learned a long time ago that the title of my presentation doesn't seem to matter because no one remembers it. So I think the title of my presentation is An Afternoon with Seth Godin, because that part I can promise is true.
Okay.
I am inspired by the fact that you're calling customer service a revolution. And my point of view is simple. Either customer service is a cost center or it's an asset. You got to pick one or the other. And most organizations say, how cheap can we make this and get away with it? And I think the revolution is, how do we create a situation where the more we spend on this, the happier we are? Because there's two kinds of customers and there's two kinds of organizations, and we need leaders in the trenches who are willing to make that promise come true, that it costs more, but you'll get way more than you paid for.
Love it. I can't wait for that. All right, Seth, before we tell people where they can find more about you, your blog, your website will be in the link. Where should they get the book, Seth? Is Amazon or?
Yeah, just go to Seths.blog/thepractice, or go to Amazon or your favorite bookstore. It doesn't really matter.
I will put your Seth.blog.thepractice in the show notes. But I got to ask you some very tough questions, and if you need to tap out, you can. Who is better, in your opinion, Superman or Batman?
Superman. Batman is a bad guy.
Yeah, this is for you because you grew up and I believe lived your whole life in New York. Mets or Yankees?
I made a deal with my kids. They couldn't follow both because I hate baseball, because I grew up in Buffalo, which has no baseball.
Right. Well, now they do. They get the Blue Jays are playing there.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Toronto wouldn't let the Blue Jays play in Toronto because of the borders. Okay, so you won't have this next one. Designated hitter or let the pitcher bat? You don't care.
No, I do care very much about this issue. And I think there's no doubt that the pitcher should bat.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but it's been resolved this year, and they've gone to a universal DH.
Well, because it's good business.
Yes. Good. Okay. What would your last meal be? For whatever reason, tonight was your last meal. What would you have?
I've been cooking for myself and my family every day for 30 or 40 years. So I have the luxury of having my last meal every night. And so it's probably sweet potato noodles with a dosa and some makhni dal.
What's the last thing? A dosa?
Makhni, makhni dal.
Okay.
Black lentils, chickpeas, 7 Indian herbs like cumin, and tomato sauce in the pressure cooker. And it is the king of dal. There's lots of different kinds of dal, but you work your way up to makhni dal.
Okay. See, like mine would be something I haven't had in 20 years, like double stuffed Oreos and
Right. So you don't have to worry about indigestion. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Then bocce pizza with mushrooms.
Nice. And you don't care about swelling the next day because no one's going to see it. Snooze or jump right out of bed?
I do not understand the snooze button. I'm about to make a podcast about the snooze button. The snooze button is just a pox against humanity and all that is right in the world. Who invented the snooze button?
I 100% agree. My other thing, which you may or not be able to answer, is open your presents on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. To me, that's the same thing. I think, that's just, why would you ever open it on Christmas Eve? Like, it just ruins the whole thing. But I've heard your list. I think I was on Tim Ferriss, and I ordered a bunch. I ordered for my fiance and her daughter the book that you recommended about the I forget the name of it, The Gift? No, I did order that. But my question is, what's your favorite book ever non-Seth Godin written?
I think if I point people to one book, it's probably The Art of Possibility by Ben and Roz Zander. It's just every chapter. I listen to it on audio every 4 months.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And what are you doing today? You're blogging. What are you working on? Practices coming out?
I am focused on some new workshops we're building at Akimbo. Then tonight I'm going to work on carving a canoe paddle for a friend who's in Canada.
That's very cool. And you're a coffee aficionado who doesn't drink coffee.
I wish I could. I love it. It just doesn't love me.
Wow. I didn't understand it when I heard it, but very cool. Seth, thank you so much. I will put in the show notes where to find the practice that comes out November 2020. Thank you for speaking at the Customer Service Revolution. You're going to make it our best event ever. And just thanks for all you're doing for all of us to follow.
Well, back at you. Leadership is important, and I'm honored to be on the stage with you.
Get tickets now for the 2020 Customer Service Revolution Virtual Conference, streaming every Thursday in October. Each week features a new lineup with greats like Seth Godin and Guy Kawasaki. The earlier you buy, the more you save. Grab tickets for the whole team today at customerservicerevolution.com. We appreciate you tuning into this week's episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast, where we featured Seth Godin. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know with a review. We love to hear your feedback and even feature some of our favorites on our podcast page. To hear future episodes, subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening and for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.